Well, every once in a while we check in with Canada Football Chat and see what they're doing with their rankings. There's a few new wrinkles to the rankings, and we brought on Clint Uttley from CFC to tell us about it. Clint, thanks for coming into the studio today.
Pleasure.
Okay, you've got a 100, you got a top 10, you got a 60, you got a 27. You're throwing a bunch of numbers at me. Let's focus on the top 100, and let's focus who's at the number one on the top 100 of players in their senior year of high school right now, and how is it shaping up?
Right now, we'll release the new list, so next year's recruiting list. So grade 11's heading into 12. So next year, there's a young man from Ottawa, Ontario, plays at a prep school down, Mercyhurst down in Pennsylvania, Jesse Lukita. He'll be the number one on the list. Right now, I think he has 42 plus NCAA offers, and he has everybody in every power conference at this point has offered him a scholarship. So he's already chosen, so he's going to go to Penn State. But yeah, he's going to be the number one prospect or the number one player on the list heading into next season.
You know, taking a look at your top five in your 100, four of them right now are going to prep schools in the United States. The other one is a BC kid going to a school in Ontario. Is this necessarily good for the game? We're talking off camera about this, that it might be good for the individual, but not necessarily good for the game in this country to have anywhere from the top 20 to top 25 leaving the country, parents spending a whole lot of money to send them to academies.
Yep. Right now, like you said, 4 of the 5 have headed down south. We have a young man from Fort Mac who's number 2, but he's playing in Virginia. And then you have a young man from Salmon Arm here in BC who's playing at St. Andrews College in Newmarket or Aurora, Ontario. And then you have the two Brown brothers who are playing at a private Catholic high school in Florida. So yeah, they're looking to play a more competitive schedule. Some of them play for really good high school teams in Canada, but for whatever reason, they think the exposure that they get at the private school in the States will help them. So they're making that choice. Will it drain, like a brain drain or a talent drain? Yeah, I think that's very much the case. But until there's a structured system in Canada where these young men can go and play against the highest competition possible, which we're starting to get now, they're probably going to continue to do that until they get an option to do so in Canada.
Okay, you say it's starting to happen now. How is it starting to happen now?
Right now, when you're on the recruiting path, you talk to recruiters, you talk to the recruits, you talk to a bunch of different people, you talk to parents. Right now, there are private school football coaches from the United States and prep schools who are making recruiting trips into Canada. So they have somebody here in Canada who's feeding them information, and then they come up and they recruit the very high-end kids, and they basically say, come to Virginia. We'll pay your tuition, we'll pay your room, we'll pay your board. You'll come and get a great 2-year education, prep education, and we'll make sure that you get your SATs and you can go on after that.
We've seen how players develop in this game, though, and what a kid is at the age of 15 or 16 can be different from 19 and can be different from around 21, 22. How much is the game overall, do you think, losing out by having this top-end talent at that age draining to the United States? And what, if anything, can Canadians do about it with Canadian institutions, Canadian high schools, even Canadian prep schools do about this to ensure that the level of competition still remains high within the game here?
Yep, all start at the bottom and go up. So like high schools, right now if you went through all the high schools in Canada, say you just use our top 50 as a starting point, those are like competitive schools playing competitive schedules for the most part. And then beyond that, so they're doing a legitimate, they're putting together a program that the kids get better in. If you go beyond that, there's the prep schools. There's 3 in Ontario right now. There was 4, but now I think there's only 3. The kids are going there and they're getting a full American schedule. So they're working out, on a 12-month periodized program. I know for 2 of the prep schools. Then they go down to Ohio and they go down to Pennsylvania, play super competitive schedules. So that's what they're doing. And then as far as the CIS, or the U Sports, as they call it now, I've been out for a bit, but I think
not everyone calls it that, by the way, but anyway, go on.
I think we're at the point now where they've done kind of a bit of a practice run with female hockey with the full scholarships. I think if they want to stop the drain, there's going to be a point where the CIS schools, because the CIS, I'm going to continue to call it that, they've made huge gains in the last like 10 to 15 years. Like things have really been speeding up, and the overall programs have gotten better and better and better. So now I think everything around it needs to get better, and I think they have to raise the money in the football programs, and they got to start offering kids full. It's a case of, if you want to keep a kid back here in Canada, it's a full tuition waiver, it's a full football athletic scholarship. Because right now, on our list, 23 of the 25, the top on the 100, got full scholarships. So it's kind of a matter of, did they leave Canada? Yes. Are they going to school for free? Yeah, they are. If they stayed in Canada, would they go to school for free? No, they wouldn't. Some of them, it's an option to stay because maybe they come from a better financial background. But if you're offered free, I mean, free is free.
But if you're going to a top Division I program, you're going to a top Division I program. The players that you're talking about are really players who look at Division II or something that's not a top Division I program, but are still getting their educations paid for. If you were trying to set the bar somewhere for full ride scholarships in Canada, and we're looking at rosters of anywhere between 75 to 90, how many of those positions do you think it would take to get funding for a U Sports roster?
I think it would just be a case of, like, right now they all have money in place for athletic awards. They do. And they've been at it for a while now from a fundraising perspective. So I would do something like they do in Division II. And it's like everybody has 35 full tuition or full scholarships, and it's up to the school on how they want to break it down. So if you're out in the Maritimes and you can't get kids like the elite level talent to go to the Maritimes, well, then maybe you just have 35 kids on a full scholarship, and that makes up 95% of your dress roster. Where it's different in Quebec, where the kids are, you're not going to have to give them that much to get them to come to your school, so maybe you cut those 35 in half and it gives you 70. You know, but really I think it's a matter of they'll have to move to that at some point. That's how they're going to keep kids back. Like, because we're at the point now where kids leave because it's free. And if it's not free, well, then there's the allure of the NCAA. So, I mean, I used to always tell kids when I was a coach in university, if you get to go for free, well, then go for free. If you're going to have to spend more at that school than you would at my school, well, I can pretty much guarantee you that you're going to get a better education at McGill or UBC or Acadia. Those are the three schools I worked at. Then you're going to get at East West Texas Baptist University somewhere in the Panhandle, you know? And that's how I broke it down for the kids, and that's how I would explain it to them.
But you see how difficult it is, outside of changing a logo and a name, how difficult it is to establish any sort of change at the U Sports level. Do you see any push for that? Because even when I talk to leading coaches in the OUA or in Canada West, they're of the opinion that even if that money is out there, they're not necessarily retaining some of these kids. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think kids are going to go because they see that there's more from a production standpoint. It's just bigger. When you get a chance to play, even if it's from 25,000 people up to 100,000 people, you know, that's part of it as well, right? You want to go and play the most competitive in the most competitive setting you can play on the highest profile that you can play. So some of them, they get sold a bill of goods and they end up somewhere where it's not as good as any of the teams in the U Sports. And then there's other ones, if they're going 1A or 1AA, I mean, if I was a U Sports coach still and they had a full 1A or 1AA offer, I would be like, you should probably explore that and you should go.
Let's switch gears a bit. You've got a top 60 list. Explain to me what this is all about.
We found the last 2 years, we found that we would make up a top 100. And then on that top 100, it would be populated by like, say 35 kids who are out of the Quebec CEGEP system. And we were like, there's so many kids who play football in CEGEP who should be on this list, but we can't build the whole list for them. And then we also looked at the age difference. So a senior in Alberta might be 17, maybe 18 max, where a senior in a CEGEP program in Quebec could very well be 20 plus. So we were like, let's make up our own CEGEP/junior college list. So these kids could be a 100, and then maybe they didn't qualify, or maybe they have to go to CEGEP, which they do in Quebec. So they don't necessarily fall off, and we can still give them a bit of press. And we're just going to make a secondary list. And it's like, the 100 is only for high school kids, and the 60 is only for those kids who are in CEGEP and junior college.
When you were thinking of going through this process in its infancy, did you think of any sort of path to incorporate CJFL players in this? Because Canada West teams and even some of the AUS teams in the past have lived off of some of that CJFL talent eventually graduating up to the university level.
Yeah, I mean, we thought about that, but then at the same time, we were like, okay, if they go to junior, are they going to go to junior for the full 4-year run? Where in CEGEP, they're supposed to be there for 2 years, and then they move on. And in junior college, they might redshirt, so 3 years max. But yeah, we've discussed that. And within the algorithm of the point scoring, we don't consider a CJFLer as a transfer, so he still maintains his points from whatever he got when he was a player in high school, whereas it's different for transfer students. But yeah, we've thought about that.
Okay, so take me through the algorithm. You've mentioned this to me a few times. You mentioned it on the radio show. I think one of the funnier things about it is you're insisting that some of the CIS coaches out there are trying to figure out what it is
Yes.
and how to make it work for them. Explain to me how you apply an algorithm to putting a list like this together, because obviously there are so many challenges when you take a look at a country like Canada with its geography and how everyone's spread out and how regional the game is to actually put a national list together.
Yep. Basically, we'll look at a prospect, and then we have a list or a checklist. And it's a list that I've built up over the years through all my years of recruiting, through talking to CFL scouts, through reading up on certain things. And we basically go down and it's like height, weight. And then we go down and it's like there's all these different things that can add up where they get a plus or they get a minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. And it's very positional based. So for an offensive lineman, it could be anything from his hands, his feet, his pass set, his body, how he controls his body. Does he have knee bend? I'm just going on here, but we have all those things, and it basically turns into a check or a minus. And then we go down through it, and at the end of that, you'll get a score. And then within that score, we'll look at something that's already predetermined score. So it'll be height, weight, and there's all these variables fall into it, because we found that when the people started the Scouting Bureau, they researched what Rivals does, what 247 does, and they kind of wrapped their head around it and got an idea. And you have to do it that way. So like when I evaluate a kid, I'm not basically, he's going through the same process as the next kid's going to go to, where I don't just watch a film and it's like, oh.
So how much of it is biometrics and how much of it is performance that you actually scout on film?
I don't know if I can really throw a number on it. What I can say is, I would say biometrically, probably about 25 or 30% of it. I would, because I mean, you can't teach or coach a kid to be 6'5". You can't teach or coach a kid to just from a body type to be that body type. I mean, you can improve strength, you can improve speed to some degree, but like if they're fast, then obviously there's somewhere on that scale that's going to give them more points. If they're extremely big, tall, and long, well, then that would tell me they have a body type that can put muscle mass on and gain weight or put on weight. So then they're obviously going to score better than somebody who might be an offensive lineman and he's 6 feet tall. How many of us look at offensive linemen who are 6 feet tall? Or if I look at an offensive lineman who's 6'6", I'm just like, okay, now there's a big piece of clay I can mold into whatever I want to mold them into.
So this list is more about potential than performance on the spot on that day that you evaluate them.
Yep, well, we were looking at it and we're like, okay, this player here could go to a U Sport school and could be an All-Canadian. He has the potential to do that. So this is not a production list. So you could be the #1 receiver coming out of CEGEP. You have 1,200 yards receiving with 18 touchdowns. And then there might be a kid from BC who's 6'4", who had 12 catches for 300 yards and ran like a 4.5 or whatever. The young man who is 6'4" and ran a really fast 40 is going to trump that AAA All-Star from CEGEP who just knows how to play, because he went through an outstanding system, went through the Quebec program, and just knows how to play the game. So the prospect will trump the production, yeah.
So take me through the top 27 now. I want to go through process, and then we'll talk about the list that's changed a little bit since it was released last week. you must have an algorithm or at least an equation that you apply to this. There's two different lists.
Yep.
One of them's a overall list based on the number that come through the doors in their ranking. Then there's a per player list. Which one do you put more weight on?
I would say the score per player. I mean, I'm a big fan of like quality over quantity. There's a lot of U Sport coaches who believe in just recruit as many kids as you can, get them in through the door, and then we're going to make our guys. However, and some of them will pan out and some of them won't pan out, but it's just a pure numbers thing. But I'm a big fan of like players. Like if you're getting a whole recruiting class and they're getting in a certain level and it's a high level, well, that would tell me they probably have more potential. Whereas opposed to the whole mass recruiting thing, where you recruit, 18 linebackers for 3 spots. Well, then how is the 6th middle linebacker ever going to have an opportunity to play? So I put a lot more stock in the per points.
Okay, let's talk about the list now. Montreal's moved up to number 1 on this list. Calgary holds tight at number 2, slipping a spot. St. Mary's is in the middle of this. How did that happen?
We just did an article on them, and we just did a recruiting article on them. So, I mean, Coach Colsey, his name is everywhere right now. He's obviously working hard. His staff is identifying kids. They're getting some really big offensive linemen, which helps in that algorithm, right? The biometric part of it. They've got a number of receivers who are just outstanding receivers. They got 3 CFC 100s. So, they've kind of checked the box in every way. Like, they got big linemen, they got some outstanding skill players, and they recruited a couple of CFC 100s. So, I would say, I went in as far as to say in that article that, like, it's their best recruiting class since, like, Steve Samara left. Because, back in the Samara and then prior to that was the Blake era, they were having a great recruiting class year in and year out, and then it fell off for a while. And that was a direct result to the 0-8, 0-8, and whatever. And now they cut a couple games under their belt, and now they're starting to land kids from all over the place. And if you look at their class, they got kids from coast to coast. So they're obviously beating the bushes trying to find kids.
Laval comes in at 4th, UBC at 5. It seemed that UBC had been landing players, but according to your index, not the quality of players that are going to push them up the list.
They've landed a number of CFC 100s, and they had a number of really good players, but they've also landed a lot of kids who are solid prospects, but like they're good players. They weren't like great players. Whereas St. Mary's, well, if you recruit 25 kids and 20 of them are legitimate prospects, well, then your score will go up. If you recruit 40 kids and 20 of them are legitimate prospects, well, then that's gonna pull you down a bit. Where it's a little different with Montreal and Laval. Montreal and Laval, they basically, a year in advance, because of their success and their programs, they can basically go out and pinpoint recruit what they want or what they need within their depth chart, I would assume. But UBC, they went from landing a bunch of really solid kids, and then they've added a bunch of really good local prospects, but they just don't have the same point value as the other guys.
And on the opposite side, it goes Calgary, Mac, UBC, Montreal, and Western, all familiar names in terms of volume.
Yep.
UBC slips a spot. Mac comes up. That's one of the things that throws one of these lists off, though. When you have a school that puts out that press release announcing all of their recruits at a single time, I guess that's why people have to keep their eyes on your site.
Yeah, they try and keep it up to date as much as they can. So it's constantly getting updated, the 27, the score line. But like when 3 weeks ago, McMaster came out and released, I think it was like 41 players in a 24-hour span. It was like, and it was just like, oh, we're releasing all of our defensive recruits today. And I remember the people who do the 27, it was shock and awe because they try and do an article on each individual. Right? So it's like they were just bombarded. But yeah, that's the way it works. And let's be honest, since the CFC 27 came out 5 years ago, I think there was 350 CIS recruits that year. And I think we're pushing up close to 800 this year. So, obviously there's recruiting battles going on and people are trying to push themselves up the list because it helps.
one team whose numbers in terms of recruiting has gone way down this year for any number of reasons, the Saskatchewan Huskies.
Yep.
They're currently sitting with 6 announced recruits. A couple of questions for you on that. First of all, how can they make up ground in a hurry? And B, should they have had to have made up ground in a hurry? Should there have not have been some sort of process during that 3-month hiring process where they were still landing recruits based upon academics, if nothing else?
Well, anytime there's a coaching change, it's going to slow down the recruiting process. Historically, they've released them at the Old Dogs. I believe it's Old Dogs Breakfast.
Dog's breakfast.
Dog's
yeah.
Breakfast. So they save it for that because it's a big part of their process. But I mean, if you put those to the side, perception is perception. When a young man looks at that list, and maybe not in Saskatoon, because I'm pretty sure every young man in Saskatoon probably has dreams of being a dog at some point. However, if you use their in-province rival, I mean, Regina has been all over it since the end of their season. I think they released like 10 players before their season ended. So, I mean, that is their direct competitor. So when Regina has a top, 10 class, and Sask is sitting there with 6 kids on the board, I mean, it goes back to perception. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell them how to do their business, but I mean, there's a point where they have to create like an excitement in the recruiting world. Can they make it up? I don't think you can make it up. I really don't. I don't think you can make it up now. I think everybody knows who all the top kids are in every province. So not only did they lose a ton of them to Regina, they lost a really good middle linebacker to SFU, and they probably lost some other really good kids to some other provinces. And you can't really make it up like you used to with the junior football program. Back in the day, they would load up on Hilltoppers and Rams. Well, now they're going against the Rams, and maybe they get a couple Hilltoppers, but now with the media and your ability to go on a huddle account for the Hilltoppers or whatever, those kids are getting recruited much more than they ever were in the past. So,
Clint, thanks very much for coming in. We appreciate you running over here, and CanadaFootballChat.com is the site. And when can we expect a new Top 100 and a new Top 60 coming out?
The Top 100 will go no later than the Wednesday of this week. And then within 5 business days or a week, the 60 is going to go out shortly thereafter.
Great. Thanks very much for this. Clint Uttley, ladies and gentlemen.